Hello and welcome to Pit Talk, a Fox Sports and Speed Cafe Formula One podcast. On today's episode, it's the Formula One week of the Las Vegas Grand Prix, the first race in Sin City in more than 40 years in what the sport promises will be the biggest racing spectacle of the year. But can the race possibly live up to the massive hype that's been built up around it? And what sort of Grand Prix should we be expecting? My name is Michael Laminato, motorsport writer for Fox Sports Australia. It's great to have your company and the company of my co-host from Speed Cafe. He's just arrived in Las Vegas, but he's wisely kept away from the blackjack table so far. It's Ian Parks.
Hello. How you doing, Michael? Hello, everybody. Good to be here.
I'm doing very well.
A quick word for our fallen colleague, Matt Koch, the ginger-bearded person, as you know. Matt is unfortunately a bit poorly, so he can't make it today. So you've got me instead. But I am in Las Vegas, as you said. I have stayed away from the blackjack tables. I do like a bit of blackjack, but I'll have to show good restraint, I think, across the next few days. Otherwise, I could end up coming home a whole lot poorer.
Yeah, well, you got plenty of time. The scheduling of this race, as we'll get to a little bit later, means you've got a lot of time during the day to fill with any activities you may choose, because it is a little bit of a wacky schedule. Great for Australia, by the way. 5 p.m. race, 7 p.m. qualifying. A little bit wackier for you guys with midnight qualifying and 10 p.m. in Vegas. But Ian, you've just arrived and you've had a long day of looking around, which is great, not just for sightseeing purposes, but for work purposes. Seeing how the track build's been going up. They're in the throes of the final stages of putting together this roughly 6-kilometer street circus that includes, of course, Las Vegas Boulevard, the Strip, all those sites that people will recognize almost instinctively if you've watched any television or movies to come out of the United States in the last 50 years, let's be honest. What are your first impressions? What's it look like during the day? Admittedly not under lights, but nonetheless, how's the build coming along?
Las Vegas is always very unusual in the daytime because if you think about it, people have these images of Vegas and it's just neon lit up. The Strip is lit up everywhere. So Las Vegas during the daytime is actually quite dull. It's very grey. It's very beige. It's a city in the middle of the desert at the end of the day. So you have to wait until about 6 o'clock. We're coming up to, what time is it now? Not far off that. Before the sun sets, the lights are just coming on now. So just look out my hotel room window. And yeah, so I took the opportunity to have a wander around just to see how much was left, what needed to be done. Fantastic effort so far. Obviously, we've got another couple of days to go before we're actually in the paddock interviewing the teams and the drivers. And you can still see there's a lot of work going on, but knowing the Americans, they'll have it all finished and it will just look immaculate by the time the show starts with its spectacular opening ceremony that's scheduled for 7:30 local time. I think that's going to be very early Thursday morning for you guys, so 7:30 local time on Wednesday evening.
It's not too bad. I feel like all the time zone conversions for a wonderful change in Australia work out in our favour. So I'm happy to have many races in Las Vegas from that perspective, if that's what the sport wants. I noticed you were posting images on your Twitter feed over the course of the day. It's the first time I've seen a non-PR image of the Sphere, the giant orb they've built. It only was just finished a month or so ago. I'd sort of not thought about it when they announced this race. You know, they talked about it's going to be a great spectacle there. What's it like to see that in person? Because it looks a little bit terrifying, if I'm honest.
My room actually overlooks the Sphere. So that's why I was able to post a great little video. And you can put anything on there. It's just one of the most amazing facilities I think I've ever seen. And if anybody looks at my Twitter feed and this little video that I've posted, it's of this big yellow face with big eyes. It's almost like an emoji. Imagine an emoji on top of the Sphere, and they've got it moving and blinking and smiling and doing all kinds of things for about a minute. And throughout the day, they've had various things going on around the Sphere. And of course, the racetrack, as we well know, winds its way around the Sphere. So that is going to look pretty amazing. We're going to get the Strip, obviously. That's going to look spectacular, as we know, with all the hotels along there. But that little twisty bit, that's going to give people the opportunity to have a great look at the Sphere. Unfortunately for me, Michael, U2 have decided not to play this week because of Formula One. So I am supremely disappointed because I really wanted to go and watch U2 play at the Sphere. And unfortunately, they've decided they're going to take a week off thanks to Formula One. Cheers. Yeah. Thanks, Formula One. You've ruined my week.
It did look spectacular, those shows as well, from the videos I've seen of their, it's about a month long or 36 show residency, I think it is. Looks spectacular. It's a venue, I mean, it's a venue unlike any other as far as I understand, but we'll get the outside view at least during the race. My understanding is Formula One's essentially taken control of it because they've had to pay for U2 essentially not to be performing. And so we'll see some F1 based projections over the course of the 3 days, which will be interesting. I assume they'll be using it for advertising purposes, but maybe they'll get more creative than that. We'll see some unique stuff. It's been a massive project, as you've alluded to get this. I mean, any street circuit is. I guess that's the basic understanding, first of all. Any street circuit is a massive project to get off the ground because you've got to bring public roads into a standard for racing, and then you think about pit buildings and all that kind of stuff. But this has been a little bit different, hasn't it, Ian? Because Formula One, first of all, is very invested in this project getting off the ground because it's a great spectacle, but are also literally invested in this project. It's a unique business model for Formula One in the sense that they not only, they're putting the race together, but are putting the entire venue together. They are the promoter of this race as opposed to a local body or a government or whatever. It's a lot of risk for Formula One. Clearly, they're backing themselves to pull it off, though.
It's a lot of money, as you mentioned. We're in Las Vegas, where everybody loves a flutter, and this is a big gamble, And this is worth, by the close of this event, when everybody's packed up and gone home and everything's put back together again, Formula One's going to be looking at close to $500 million US dollar bill. So that's a massive amount of money that they are putting into this. But the belief is, with the attraction of Vegas, they are going to make eventually a lot of money. Now, at the moment, there's only a three-year contract in place, but that will definitely be extended. Every circuit these days, with the exception of poor old Belgium and Spa-Francorchamps, seems to be signing these long 10-year deals. And as Formula One controls this event, it's the first time Formula One has actually decided to promote one of its own Grand Prix, of course, with Liberty Media's backing. It's looking at a completely different projection now as to what it wants from an event. Previously, as we know, it rakes in money from sponsors, it rakes in money from TV companies. Now it has to rake in money in a very different shape and form by hosting this event. It's built up the infrastructure. Now it's got to rake in the revenue off the back of that. But it will not surprise me in a couple of years' time, just before this contract is due to expire, if not beforehand, that they will announce a new long-term contract. The biggest thing for this circuit, as with any street circuit, as we've seen in Miami, which was not the greatest when it first came on, even Azerbaijan in its first year, everybody thought, what the heck? And then it turned into a great racing spectacle. It's going to be the racing. That's going to be what will make this race stand out above any other street circuit venue that we have on the calendar at the moment.
How many people or entities have rocked up in Vegas thinking they were going to win big eventually? So maybe, I don't know, Formula One will get to the stage where it has to think about cutting its losses, but I don't suspect so. I think they're pretty confident with the way it's going. We'll talk about the race and our expectations a little bit later on, but a big part as well of the street circuit build is the disruption. I mean, especially when you are, in this case, literally in the heart of the busiest part of the city, as you are down the strip in Las Vegas Boulevard, there is immense disruption. We're now at that stage of the build where, because the race is so soon, everything should be flowing before it just closes. The big build is mostly completed, I suppose. But what's been your sense of the local response to the way this race has been getting underway and disrupting to the city for, I guess, the better part of about around 19 months since it was announced last March?
Yeah, and they started construction on the main building in November last year. It's literally taken them a year to put this together. And then for the last 8 months in particular, as my Uber driver described it last night, in driving me from the airport to the hotel, the last 8 months has been crazy, he said, crazy. Initially, there was quite a bit of local opposition, as you would expect. They don't want their city disrupted. But I think, looking around now that we are in race week, I think the anticipation and the expectation is building. And even my Uber driver said that he was now looking forward to it. So I think it's just one of those that you just get used to something. Yeah, you don't want it to start with. You get a bit fed up with the disruption. Oh, you've got to go round this or over that and what have you. But now I think we're here. There is a great sense of anticipation now, and people are looking forward to this. In pre-chatting, before we came on, Michael, I did mention to you that if you're just an ordinary, I use that word, spectator, if you're hoping to come to Vegas and see the Bellagio fountains this week, you're clean out of luck, unless, of course, you're actually staying at the Bellagio, because that's the only way you will get to see the fountains, because you've actually got to go into the Bellagio, out through the entrance of the hotel, and you'll get to see the Bellagio, get to see the fountains. But if you're just walking along the strip, there is now a massive grandstand in front of the Bellagio fountains, and there's just this little gap through some fencing about 20 meters wide, that you get to see the fountains. And everybody knows the fountains is one of the most iconic sites in Las Vegas. Not for anybody who's got a general ticket this weekend, it won't be, that's for sure.
No recreating the final scene of Ocean's 11, I guess, for anybody who's rocked up for this Grand Prix. But it is sort of interesting. I've been reading about that entire situation. A lot of trees were cut down the strip to build some of these hospitality areas. Likewise, I think anyone who might be going to the Venetian to be on a gondola ride in the lagoon, I think the lagoon's empty because it's been turned into a hospitality area. So there has been a lot of change. Some of those main sites people might be expecting to see, they'll probably still see them in some form over the course of this weekend, but they are going to be different. Formula One really has taken over Las Vegas rather than is just running through it. I guess if you're a local, you might at least have your disappointment tempered by the fact a lot of your roads have been resurfaced at great expense. Because I saw some photos, in fact, of the strip, the road before. And in fact, half of the strip is not even resurfaced. It's only one half where they're going to be racing on. Yeah. It's a pretty beaten up road. I think some of those roads probably needed a little bit of love.
Absolutely. It's like anywhere else. And looking at the surface today, I've actually walked across it at one point from one side of the strip to the other. And it just looks like any other fantastic racing surface, to be fair. And a lot of work went into laying down this new asphalt. They had to dig, depending on where they were, 5 to 10 inches, scrape away 5 to 10 inches of the top layer of the old road surface, and then start to build up from there before they finally got what they hope will be a decent racing surface. But of course, it's a racing surface that's going to be operating in very different conditions, as we well know, because as most people know, it's a night race. But at this time of year in Vegas, bearing in mind we are in the middle of the desert, and the temperatures are going to dip to about 10, 11 degrees. Initially, it was expected it could even dip into single digits. It was going to be that cold because that's the way it can get at this time of year. So it's actually going to be a little bit warmer than what was anticipated. But even so, 10, 11 degrees is nothing that F1 experiences over the course of a normal calendar event weekend. So something totally unique in many respects, not just the event, the venue itself, but in terms of the actual racing and the drivers, the teams, trying to get the heat into those Pirelli tyres to ensure they can get decent lap times, consistent lap times. That's going to be the one fascinating aspect, I think, of this whole weekend to watch.
Yeah, I think anyone who's looked at the track layout and might find it a little bit uninspiring needs to consider those conditions, because as you said, no race is run in conditions this cold. The last one that got close, I think, was the 2020 Eiffel Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. That was run, I think it was in October. It might have been November from memory. And there was a cold snap. Even that shouldn't have been that cold at the time. And the race did go ahead. Admittedly, an entire practice day was lost, though, because conditions were so poor. The tyre warm-up was difficult. It was a little bit weird. It did create some difficult results, particularly after a late safety car, if memory serves. But it's not just the cold. It is the layout that works in tandem. There's pretty much no high-speed corners at this track. There are a couple of medium-speed ones. The fact that there'll be so little downforce on the cars might make them seem a little bit faster than they are. The cars will be a little bit more skittish. But every big braking zone where you want maximum tyre temperature, maximum brake temperature, is preceded by a very long straight, not least of which is the strip, which is around about 2 kilometres, ends in the biggest braking zone of the corner, probably of the track, rather, probably the biggest overtaking zone of the track. there's going to be a very wacky element to this, I think, isn't it? That is going to be decisive in terms of weekend performance.
There is one high-speed corner, remember, Michael, and that's turn 13, but it's so not a corner. It's just like the slightest kink, yet they've described it as a corner or a turn. No, Formula One. And that's going down the strip. Turn 13, for anybody might be wondering, that is actually along the strip itself. But it's, as I say, you can't even class it as a turn. It's just this slight curve. Anyway, but getting back to your point, yes, it is going to be absolutely fascinating because tyre temperature, as I mentioned, is going to be crucial. And if you've not got the tyre temperature under braking going into those corners, are you going to be able to make your moves? Or are you just going to go ploughing into a concrete barrier at the end of it? There's a lot of unknowns. I mean, the one great aspect about this particular race is that for the teams, the drivers, it's an absolute leveler. No one has any clue as to what is going to take place across the 3 days later this week. They've got an idea. They've run simulations. Pirelli has done as much work as it can possibly do, but it doesn't know whether in bringing the 3 softest compounds will actually suffice for this circuit. As Mario Isola, the Pirelli Motorsport director, said at one stage, which I think was the last Grand Prix in Sao Paulo, when I asked him the question, and he said it's not as if they can make a tyre specific for this racetrack. So I am getting very dark, Michael. I'm almost non-existent. I'm just keep looking at my picture. The light is fading, and you can barely
a live
see me.
demonstration of a night race here in Vegas. You can turn on the desk light if you like and see if that helps at all. And we'll get a live demonstration of a night race here in Las Vegas. So I think that's a perfect segue, isn't it?
There we
go. Simulation of what we're all expecting. The sun does set very early in Vegas as well, but they're still running the race very late. The tyre situation is very interesting, as you were mentioning, though, because while I thought it was interesting during the week that Ross Brawn, the former CEO of Formula One, said it's not something they were really considering when they were setting up the race. Not necessarily that they forgot, but rather it just didn't enter into the thinking of it. Next year, the race is scheduled even later in the season, at the end of November. So only a couple of weeks, but nonetheless a couple of weeks closer to the coldest point of the season. This isn't so much a bug as it is a feature of this race, I suppose, isn't it? This is going to be defining, and I guess that has to enter into Pirelli's calculations for its subsequent tyre constructions and compounds.
If you think of what happened in Qatar, where everybody was bemoaning about the heat of that circuit and what that was doing to the rubber there, well, of course, Qatar, like Vegas, will come later into the season. So at least with Qatar, it should be more representative conditions. With here, and as you say, we were expecting single digits. So at least we're getting something slightly warmer this weekend. Add another couple of weeks on, and most definitely, we are almost certainly going to be in single-digit figures for when qualifying is run, when the race is run. And for those that aren't quite sure, that haven't quite looked up the situation yet, qualifying starts at midnight local time. So for anybody on the west coast of Australia, Perth side, that's 16-hour time difference. So you guys are going to get it about 4 p.m. I think that's right. And on the eastern side, the Sydney side, you're looking at 7 p.m. I think that's right, isn't it, Michael? You help me out there. Yeah. So, but midnight, yeah, I'll be discovering it later because I'm going to get out and about. I didn't do that last night. Or the other night, I was so tired that I got to bed. But tonight I'm going to go out and about. I'm going to gauge the temperature and see what Vegas looks like all lit up for real. So I've taken enough daytime photos. Time to go and take some nighttime photos as well. But the tyres is going to be the biggest aspect of this weekend. It's going to be the biggest talking point, I think. I just hope that from what the drivers have been saying, from their simulations, that they at the moment have a decent sense that the circuit should lend itself to good racing. If that's the case, we do get that level of racing, that we do get good overtaking, then Vegas will be set fair for many years to come. Because if you ally good racing with a spectacle behind it, then it's going to be the race that everybody's going to want to come to at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, the fallback option for good racing in Formula One is always long, straight, big braking zone, isn't it? Because it generates some mistakes. DRS effect will be in maximum force, really. I think this weekend we've got 2 zones, according to the latest map, out of turn 4, I think it is, to turn 5, and then down the strip, obviously. But only towards the end of it, because if you did the whole thing, it would just be a bit embarrassing for everybody, I think. So it's been tuned to hopefully give us good racing without silly amounts or silly, easy overtaking. But you sort of raised that point. It needs to be a good race as well as a well-executed spectacle. I don't think there are too many doubts that Formula One will pull off the spectacle side of things. They, as we already mentioned, they are the promoter. They are running the entire event. They knew how much they were biting off when they decided at the start of last year that it would be a 2023 race and not a 2024 race. Do you think there's really any way for this event to fail, though? I mean, there is so much hype around it, isn't there? This is being billed as the sporting spectacle of the year. Formula One has wisely put a question mark on it, but has said, could this be the greatest spectacle of all time? There is a lot of hype around this Grand Prix, and I can't help but wonder that even if everything goes smoothly, some people are going to come out of it thinking, well, was that the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life? Because that's a very high bar.
I think visually it will be, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, if you think of Singapore and what we all thought of that when Formula One first started racing there, it had the wow factor. I think this will be the double wow factor. You know, if you're the armchair viewer sitting at home, I think you're going to love it as a spectacle. But you're going to want good racing. It's the bottom line. Look at, we mentioned it before, look at Miami. There was a lot of hype around Formula One going to Miami. Unfortunately, Formula One didn't get the street circuit that it wanted there. And it built this circuit around the Miami Dolphins Stadium. And we all came out, certainly from my perspective, maybe not everybody, but I think a lot of people came out of that first event and thought, oh, is that it? Seems to be a lot of work to do. I just hope, not just for Formula One's sake, because they're promoting and hyping them, but I just hope for everybody's sake, you know, the armchair fan, the people that are spending thousands to be here for their tickets, and they have cost thousands. This is way and above the price of any other ticket for another Grand Prix. I just hope everybody that is here or is watching at home on TV gets to look at this event and think, not only was it a fantastic spectacle, but wow, can't wait for next year's race, because that was a mind-blowing event. Great overtaking, lots of good action. But that's all Formula One needs at the end of the day, isn't it? It's all we hope for as F1 fans, as F1 media. We just want great racing. Formula One wants it as well, of course. Let's not undermine that. But us as viewers, as the fans, we just want a spectacular racing event. And I just really, really hope that that's what we get this weekend.
Yeah, and either way, it certainly does inject a little bit of excitement and intrigue into a season that's been so straightforward so far, hasn't it? It's been a date in the calendar that's been something to look forward to in this dead rubber phase of the year. So at least we're going to have that. And as Formula One has acknowledged, the sporting world is going to be looking at Formula One this weekend. It's taking over Vegas, where big events always happen. It has Vegas as a backdrop. It's not in a building in Vegas. It is in Vegas. So it's going to look spectacular. Let's talk a little bit about that racing expectation as well, because that is what it's going to hinge on. I think very interesting, combined with the cold, the smoothness of a circuit, the layout of the track. I have a little bit of optimism in this isn't going to be a Red Bull walk in the park, as so many races have been. We know the only race they've lost was a street track. It was Singapore, very different type of circuit, admittedly, but there are, of course, some similarities in how you have to adjust for street tracks to ride the curbs and things like that, things that we will discover after Friday practice. But the cold weather element is actually Red Bull's only Achilles heel, if we want to even call it that. Tyre warm-up, not a strength of the car. I'm thinking particularly in qualifying, this could be a very surprise result at a time, Ian, when, for example, McLaren is really looking increasingly threatening.
This could be an ideal type of circuit for McLaren. We know that they are good at tyre warm-up. We know that they are good with this type of low downforce track. And as you rightly pointed out, Red Bull has got its minor issues in what has been let's face it, an epic season for them. Max Verstappen especially, let's put it that way, maybe not quite for Sergio Perez. We saw what could happen at Singapore. That I think that caught everybody by surprise. A bit like back in the Mercedes dominance years, Singapore always seemed to be the circuit that caught them out. So then we had it with Red Bull, and I don't think they've quite understood why that circuit was so different for them, even now, looking back. Obviously, the temperatures are going to be very, very different. We're talking about 20 degrees, just air temperature from Singapore to Las Vegas. But as you've mentioned, they have struggled a little bit with tyre warm-up. Hopefully that could play into the hands of one of their rivals, and their main rival at the moment, Christian Horner, said it after Brazil, are McLaren. Not Ferrari, not Mercedes, it's McLaren, as we know, have made sensational strides ever since they placed those upgrades on that car, initially in Austria and then again in Singapore itself. So fingers crossed, as I'm still a neutral at the end of the day, don't get me wrong. Red Bull, Max Verstappen have been absolutely brilliant, fantastic with what they've done, their achievements off the charts, the records they've created. Some of those you think will probably never be beaten. But as an outsider looking in, which is what I am for the most part as a journalist covering this sport, we just want to see something different on occasion. And I think we might get that this weekend. Let's hope so. I hope you're right, by the way, because you said you got a good feeling as well. So I really hope you're right on that one.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something in it. I mean, if we look at the performance differences in Brazil, for example, a couple of weeks ago, and obviously a very different track, and every track has different demands, but let's just take that as a general example. The only difference between the McLaren and the Red Bull was tyre wear, and that does correlate with tyre warm-up and temperature. If you can keep the tyres in that temperature window, that has been the defining challenge of the Pirelli era, you can get better tyre usage out of it. If the weather helps bring McLaren's tyre usage down, and perhaps even suppresses Red Bull's ability to get into that window, can make an enormous difference. The same, I think, will go for Ferrari. I'm quietly optimistic that Ferrari might enter the challenge here as well. If we think about the type of circuit we're facing, very fast, long straights, it's going to be very low downforce. It looks very different to Monza, but the demands actually might end up being very similar. And who was on pole position in Monza? It was a Ferrari. It was Carlos Sainz, I think, if memory serves me correctly. And did kind of challenge at the first half of the race, never ultimately had the pace to really go for the victory. But again, the difference in so much of performance comes down to tyre usage, particularly when you're in minimum wing, low downforce scenario where there's less of a difference between the cars because it's less about downforce, which is what development is all about in Formula One, and more just about straight line speed and how little drag you can have. So I'm optimistic, combined with the fact that this is such an unknown, as you said, Ian. No team has historical data here. They've only got their simulations and best guesses, and they'll only have, 3 practice sessions sounds like a lot for any track, but it's not that much when it's a brand new track and you've got wacky conditions like this. I think there could be a really interesting mix by the time we get to qualifying and then Sunday, particularly considering then again, no one knows how strategy is going to go, particularly when tyre warm-up is going to be difficult. The undercut's probably not going to be powerful. There's a lot that goes into this race that I'm quietly optimistic. I'm not just saying this because I think everyone should get involved and watch it, but we will have a genuine race here, or a genuine interesting spectacle at a minimum. And I think that, even if the race is relatively straightforward, if we get a weird winner or a weird battle, it'll be a memorable event.
And you've mentioned 3 of the teams, and we've got no idea what 2 of the other biggies are going to do. Mercedes, such an up and down season. We expected more of them in Brazil. It never materialized. They had major issues there. And Aston Martin seems to be slowly coming out of its funk that it's been in for quite a while. It now appears to have finally got a handle on those upgrades it placed on the car in Austin. It admitted that perhaps it was a bit too sudden trying to put 2024 ideas on its 2023 car, but now they've got a good idea as to what's happening with that car. So we might see something pretty special from them. As you say, this race is a great unknown, nothing historical, nothing that we can reflect on, look back on. That's why it's so fascinating at the moment, and why, for me, it's probably one of the most eagerly anticipated events I can recall, more than Miami, more than Singapore. And now that I'm here and the lights are coming on through my hotel window, I can see the The Venetian is lit up in the background over there. So the monorail's going. Right opposite my window is the world's largest wheel. One of those wheels that goes around, viewing platforms. Couldn't think of the right words then, it escaped me. And I can see the Sphere as well, just around the corner. So everything's set up for it not to fail. We've just got to hope that, as you said at the very start of this program, that it lives up to all the hype now.
Yes, well, we'll wait and see. It's not long now till cars hit the track in Las Vegas. Ian, I'm going to let you go and enjoy the sunset and whatever's on the giant sphere, because that's got for Pit Talk this week. We will be back next week to wrap up all of the action, no matter how chaotic, from the Las Vegas Grand Prix. You can subscribe to Pit Talk wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and you can watch the podcast on YouTube. Just search Fox Sports Australia, and follow updates throughout the weekend at the Las Vegas Grand Prix on both foxsports.com.au and speedcafe.com. Until next week, from Ian Parks and me, Michael Laminato, we'll catch you then.